All right, starting at the Jiu-Jitsu Company in Old City, Philadelphia. I'm gonna head up and I'm gonna go up Walnut Street today, whereas last time I went up Market Street and, sorry, just putting gloves on. Last time I went up Market Street and then up Arch Street to go to Reading Terminal Market. This time I'm gonna go up Walnut Street, I think, maybe Chestnut and then Walnut, so that I can go find some lunch somewhere. I have a very specific thing, oops, dropped my skateboard, specific thing I want to talk about today regarding Jiu-Jitsu, and I'll get to that in a minute. But before that, I was looking for a good word to describe what today's weather is like. It's like this weird, sort of sunny sometimes, and then sort of like depressed and peaked looking. And I think the word is wan, W-A-N. It's sort of like, I guess sort of sickly at times. I don't know. That's just me nerding out and trying to sound smarter than I am. This is a beautiful corner, Second and Chestnut. Anyway, the thing I wanted to talk about regarding Jiu-Jitsu is this idea of downloading people's games. So here's how the topic came about. I was talking to my friend Didi, and he brought up a good question about the guillotine chokes I was teaching this week in class, which was, I was teaching like 3 or 4 different variations of guillotine choke finishes, and each version has certain strengths and weaknesses. One version makes it hard for people to escape by jumping over your guard to side control, and another version makes it hard for people to escape by spinning and rotating out of the choke. And another version makes it hard for them to, it solves the problem of you not being able to get a high wrist position or your elbow over their back. So each version has, upsides and downsides and costs and benefits and all that kind of stuff. And his question was, if you're training with somebody and it's the first time, like let's say you go to a competition and you've never rolled with this person before, and you haven't had any chance to do any sort of scouting to know anything about them, how do you know which version to use? You don't know if the person that you try to guillotine choke is going to spin out of the guillotine or if they're going to jump over to side control. And I thought that was a great question. And the heart of that question is your ability to roll with somebody or do jiu-jitsu and then make fast adjustments on the fly. I'm going to go through this little park here. It's very pretty. And that's sort of an advanced skill set that takes time to develop. In mixed martial arts, people often talk about making adjustments in between rounds. So you're fighting somebody. In MMA, you usually know who your opponent is and you have footage on them, so you can get some sort of sense of what their tendencies are. Like, are they a striker? Are they a grappler? If they're a grappler, what positions do they favor? What submissions do they favor, etc. In intermediate and more advanced jiu-jitsu, like in competition, you'll also get a sense of that, because the more you compete, the more you're going to end up competing against the same people over and over again, or at least see the same looks over and over and over again. And there's going to be more footage of your opponents, so you'll be able to study and see their tendencies. But there's a skill set of being able to quickly discern what people's tendencies are and then adjust on the fly in a short amount of time during a match. And this has to happen pretty quickly because many matches are anywhere from 5 to 10 minutes long. And that's not really a long time to be able to see what somebody likes doing, what positions they like playing, and how they defend certain things, and then make adjustments to it. So I think this is a skill set that has to be actively cultivated. And so to answer, as far as I'm concerned, to Didi's question, number one, you generally want to have one all-purpose guillotine that you use for most situations. So for example, many people use Marcelo Garcia style high elbow guillotine to solve many situations where a guillotine would be a useful attack. And that covers many bases and it solves many problems. And then they have follow-up guillotine variations that are useful in the event that that high elbow guillotine is not possible or not the right variation to use. But even then, you still have to have multiple variations if you're going to have a breakthrough and be successful with your guillotine choke. So you have to be able to download how your opponents are escaping your guillotine chokes very quickly. So you slap hands with somebody, match starts, you snap their head down, catch a guillotine choke, and you pay attention to how they defend if you're unable to finish the choke successfully that first time. And then based on that, you now have information about your partner's or your opponent's tendencies when defending a guillotine choke. And so if they escape the first time, the second time, the third time, if you know very well all the tools in your arsenal, all the different guillotine choke variations, or at least like a broad selection of them, then after the first or second time they escape, you've already downloaded their tendency. Okay, they spin out of the guillotine, kind of like Gary Tonnen does from the feet. And so I'm going to choose a variation of the guillotine choke that solves that problem. So instead of doing the first version I was doing, which may have been a high elbow version, I might do a rear naked choke variation that makes it hard for my partner's shoulders to rotate to escape from that spinning, to escape by spinning. So anyway, that's sort of a long-winded way of saying you have to be able to download your opponent's games very quickly when you're watching them roll and also when you're rolling with them. This is something that Josh Waitzkin, the former chess player / Marcelo Garcia Jiu-Jitsu black belt, talked about. I don't remember what book it is, but there was some book, maybe like the foreword of one of Marcelo Garcia's books, where I think he was talking about one of the things that made Marcelo Garcia special was his ability to quickly download people's games and know how to counter those games or neutralize those games on the fly in real time very quickly. And I think that may have been the first place that I've heard that idea expressed in a really clear way. And I think that's just brilliant. And I think that's what we all seek to do we all seek to develop as a skill set when we're talking about organizing our jiu-jitsu. How do you do that? So one thing that I recommend to my students a lot, and I'm starting to recommend to them more and more, is watching people when you're taking a round off and your training partners are all rolling with each other, or if you're the odd person out during positional sparring or during an open mat and you don't have anybody to roll with, paying attention to what the patterns are that you're seeing. So watching, the purple belt Todd rolling with the blue belt Eddie and seeing, well, what are the positions that Eddie's trying to play? How is Eddie reacting to Todd trying to do the guillotine choke? And sort of downloading Eddie's game and Todd's game by watching, getting a sense of the patterns. You can get a lot of experience doing this by watching competition footage. You watch, any competition really, and if you watch an entire event, you can see 3, 4, sometimes 5 matches of the same person, and you'll get a very clear sense of what positions they favor, how they deal with certain techniques and problems, and what their overall tendencies are when grappling. And that's a good way to do it. But it's a skill set that you have to practice. You have to actively try to observe these things when you're watching. And then you're also doing it in real time when you're rolling. You slap hands with your training partners during an open mat, and you want to try to develop almost like you want to try to download their games very quickly, but you want to try to get a sense of what everybody that you train with regularly on the training floor does over time. And you do it by rolling with them, you do it by watching them, And again, this is to sharpen the skills of observation and quickly downloading the positions that people favor, their tendencies when in those positions, and how they deal with certain submissions and sweeps and whatever. It's especially easy if you try to observe positions that you play and then see how these people deal with those positions, because it's relevant to you and it's easier to remember. Like, oh, I play knee shield half guard, and they do a leg weave pass when dealing with the knee shield half guard. So now I know that about them. So I think step one is getting in the habit of observing your training partners, getting a sense of the patterns that you see in their games, and then trying to do that more and more quickly, and making a habit of doing that every time you go to open mat and every time you watch competition footage. An additional benefit to this, when you go to open mat and you know what your training partners are good at, it really helps you figure out who to train with also, so that you can get the most out of your skill building time. So for example, when I go to open mat, I know that one of my regular training partners, who is a purple belt, has a very good spider guard, and he attacks triangles and omoplatas from that position a lot. So when I'm trying to sharpen my skill set at, say, Toriano passing, or fighting out of spider guard positions, or neutralizing triangle or omoplata attacks, he's a perfect person for me to train with. There's another person who has a similar game, but she's a brown belt, she trains more leg lasso. So when I want a similar look, but I want to experiment with passing leg lasso and build that skill set, then she is a great person to train with to develop that. And then, there's people who are good at single leg takedowns, double leg takedowns, high crotches, fireman's carries, certain types of guard passing. And so when you know what everybody's game is on the mat, you can more intelligently select your training partners to help you build the skills that you want to develop. And then it goes the other way too. If you know what your training partners are working on, and you know that your skill set fits that, then you can also be of more value to your training partners. So for example, I am not a great wrestler. So if there's somebody who's trying to go from, let's say, an intermediate level to an advanced level with their takedowns, specifically wrestling style takedowns, I might not be the best person for them to go with. But I do have a very good half guard. So if they're working on their half guard passing and they're trying to go from an intermediate level to an advanced level with it, or try to sharpen their advanced level with it, then I can pose some advanced challenges for them, and I can help sharpen their skill set in that specific area. And so I'll train with them knowing that that's what they're working on, and I'll specifically play that part of my game so that they reach the next level and then I reach the next level in my half guard. But it all comes from being observant, paying attention to what your training partners' tendencies are, what their games are like, and then also what parts of their game they're trying to develop. And so you can get good training from them and they can get good training from you. So I think you get what I'm saying regarding that stuff. What else? It's kind of an abstract idea. Like, you start off with that, and then as you get better at it, you'll start to notice that you're able to do it more and more with people that you don't know. But you start off with your training partners and people that you do know, and also with competition footage. But it's difficult sometimes to do it when you're training with somebody that you don't know, because there's a certain amount of stress and anxiety that comes along with, rolling with new people that you don't know, or going to a competition and trying to be observant in a time where you're stressed out, maybe your adrenaline's going a little bit, and you have some sort of a little bit of panic response. But I think that's the value of also training the skill set of staying calm, because I think the more calm that you can stay in grappling in general, the more you're able to use these mental skills that rely on being able to be observant and be able to quickly calculate and assess and calculate grappling situations. I think the more stressed out, panicked, the more your adrenaline's going, the more difficult that gets, and the more you tend to, I think, work more on an instinctual level, just doing automatically what you're good at, which, there's something to be said for that too, especially in competition, because everything can't be calculating in competition. There's some things that have to happen quickly, but there is something to be said for the ability to quickly assess what you need to do in a situation and calculate also. And so I think being able to control your calmness and your arousal level during a grappling match is a skill that will pay off big time if you can manage that. Know when to get amped up, know when to calm down, so that you can access your ability to calculate and do these assessments of people's games. I think another related idea to this also is something I thought about a long time ago but never really developed too much, and this idea of sort of jiu-jitsu archetypes. For example, you see somebody who's tall and lanky and fairly flexible, you would naturally assume that they're good at triangles and different open guard positions. You see somebody, shorter, maybe more squat, and you might assume that, maybe they're not great at triangles, but they might have better wrestling or something like that. And so you can kind of look at it's not just a body type thing, but it's also a personality thing where you can sort of, sort of piece together based on hints, physical and mental hints, different profiles of different grappling styles. That the skinny, barista looking person is going to be a spider monkey, inverted berimbolo type of person, or a leg locker or something if they're doing no-gi, and they're more likely to be doing that sort of jiu-jitsu than to be doing heavy pressure passing and arm triangles from the mount, for example. And it's not, obviously it's not perfect. These are stereotypes, but I do think there's something in that idea of, noticing trends in different body types and different personality types, and being able to insinuate certain patterns from those. And I think, a lot of the time those patterns can be pretty accurate. I don't know if it's, again, jiu-jitsu's, with the gi, maybe it's a little bit easier, because I think, gi styles tend to be, they seem like they're more set in stone right now. Whereas in no-gi, there just seems to be such a variety of different styles. You know what? No, that's not true. I think no-gi, sorry, I'm kind of distracted when I'm walking around. Anyway, just something to think about, different jiu-jitsu archetypes. And then seeing, if you look at the mat and look at somebody and try to guess, what kind of game they play, maybe you'll be a little bit off in some areas, but maybe you'll be accurate in other areas, like that lanky, flexible person who has good triangle chokes. But the interesting thing about that is that those same people, for example, I'm thinking of one guy that I know who is lanky and is flexible and has good triangle chokes and is spider monkey, squirm around to the back, but he's also getting pretty good wrestling, which is not something that I would have guessed just from looking at his build and guessed from his disposition. So, you know, it's not to say that people can't surprise you and that you can pigeonhole people into, you know, narrow personality types like that. But how you doing, buddy? But you can get a general sense sometimes, I think, is what I'm getting at. And then you can use that information, again, to build that profile that I was talking about of downloading your partner's games. So like you slap hands with somebody and you see that they're lanky and pretty flexible looking, meaning that their body movement is not super stiff and they kind of have a little bit of bounce to them. And you might guess that they're, you know, guard puller, spider monkey, triangle, footlock kind of person. And that gives you a certain amount of information. And then you can further deduce within the first 30 seconds to a minute that, you know, oh, in addition to that, they play Kimura trap and they use that to take the back. And because they have long legs, they have a good body triangle. And so you can sort of use those archetypes as a starting point to make guesses and inferences about what your opponents or your training partners might be good at, and then build from there, build a more accurate profile off of that. So that was just sort of like, I guess, sort of freestyle thinking about how to sort of put together a profile of somebody. You know what? I'm going to hold off on getting lunch. I'm going to go up here and go skateboarding for a little bit. So I'll continue up Chestnut Street. How you doing, buddy? So I guess kind of to recap, if I were somebody who hadn't thought about this before and I was trying to give this advice to somebody and how to start building that skill set of downloading people's games, I might start with just observing a lot and building that mental video camera of seeing what my training partners are good at, what I observe from competition footage, and then getting a sense of, you know, maybe putting together archetypes, general like profiles of different types of grapplers, you know, the lanky spider monkey and I don't know, the thicker pressure passer wrestler type, and then use those as starting points when I'm rolling with new people and testing them to see if they're accurate or inaccurate, and then refining the profile from there over time. This alley is absolutely disgusting. I skateboard here a lot, but it's really, really gross, and sometimes it's a bit much, so I guess I'll see what things are looking like today. It's not too bad. Some liquid right there, but I can live with that. All right, well, I'm gonna take a break for a minute. Comment with ideas, thoughts, feedback, anything you think about this. Let me know what you think about the whole archetype thing.